Hello, good morning and good afternoon, wherever you are in the world today. It's a lovely day here in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and we're happy to welcome you to BritCham Vietnam webinar series, episode 4, titled Vietnam Supply Chain and Trade Matters. This is a chat with some experts. Before we get started, I'd like to say a little bit about BritCham Vietnam. BritCham Vietnam was founded over 20 years ago. Next, go ahead, Toby. And we have two main jobs. We are a Chamber of Commerce and a business center. We were established, the business center in 2007, I beg your pardon, 2014. And the business center's mission is to facilitate better trade ties between British and Vietnamese companies via a range of our bespoke trade services. Our trade services are designed to help UK companies quickly kickstart their businesses in Vietnam and help them identify commercial and investment opportunities. Go ahead. The next slide shows you a little bit about the services that we do. For example, business matching, where we partner and search one-on-one meetings with potential clients. We do business service events like trade shows, trade events, setting up businesses in Vietnam, where we help you support the running of your business and investigate the due diligence for your company. We help you with market studies, business development representatives, and identify export opportunities as well. So a little bit about today's webinar. We'll do a chat with Alex Falter, Managing Director of ECCO Vietnam, and we'll chat with Bob Fletcher, Director of Customs and Global Trade at Deloitte Vietnam, followed by some Q&A questions and closing remarks. Our first speaker is Alex Falter, the Managing Director of ECCO Vietnam. He's responsible for production operations of the Danish brand in Vietnam. Having joined ECCO in 2016, following an 8-year stint as founder of sustainable fashion garment manufacturer in Northern Vietnam, Alex has a broad range of experience as managing director level in the fashion and footwear sector, doing with turnkey project completion, supply chain management, and stakeholder communication. Alex is joining us today from another location. Please welcome Alex Falter.
Hello, Brian, can you hear me? Excellent, right. Well, thank you very much for the invitation. And I suppose I'd just like to give a bit of an overview of what a Vietnamese supply chain looks like. So if we could go to my next slide, please. So this is what the export situation is. I believe these numbers were from about a year or 2 years ago. But basically you see that electronic equipment is really the key driver here. And if you'd looked at this about 10 or 15 years ago, it would have been a very, very different picture, and you'd have seen a lot more in the footwear and the apparel sectors, really. So it's quite remarkable how quickly Vietnam has latched on to the electronic assembly market. And you can really compliment companies such as Samsung, who built they've built 3 huge plants in Vietnam, and they are probably some of the biggest driving forces towards this export. But it's also worth looking at some of the new players coming into the market. You may have seen in the news that Apple is planning on doing not just its AirPods, but also its MacBooks and iPads, etc., etc. But there's still a long way to go. I mean, we don't see a lot of automotive there. We don't see a lot of aviation there. So in the broad scheme of things, Vietnam still has a long way to go to do really high value, added value in Vietnam types of exports. So at the moment, it's very assembly based. So those are the numbers, and I expect that we will continue to see electronic equipment grow. But Vietnam will maintain a fairly diversified supply chain, I imagine. Not everyone who has worked in a garment or a footwear factory will be able to transition to an electronics factory. So I think this is one of the strong benefits of Vietnam, is that it can do a little bit of everything, and having that diversification means the market is a lot stronger, especially in times like these when we have a COVID crisis. Okay, next slide, please. So again, I think these numbers are about a year old or so, but you can see very much the States and China playing a very big part of exports, and the EU, of course. So the EU there, I think added all up, is about 18 or 19%. I actually think in the last year, the EU has probably got a little bit bigger, as has the United States. So yeah, you can see it's really consumer-driven markets. There's not a huge amount being exported in terms of raw materials, whether you class aquatic products such as fish as raw materials, but you don't have a lot of mining. It is really goods that are manufactured in the country, and I think Vietnam is very, very diversified in having, Northeast Asia, in having the USA, and in having Europe, and being able to balance between all these different areas, depending on demand, really. So I think one thing we've seen during the COVID crisis is how China has been able to keep its economy running, and that's helped exports to China, of course, because the EU and the US are having slightly more difficult time, and that can also change. So when the EU and the US gets better, and there might be problems in China, you can easily balance from one way to another. Okay, next slide, please. So what should you do if you come to Vietnam? And I think it's important to research the market. It's a very, very long country. It has a lot of different specialities in different areas, and you really need to make sure that you're going to the right place. There are a lot of foreign companies. There's a lot of local companies as well. So benchmarking across all the different types is quite important. You also need to benchmark with other countries. There is sometimes a bit of a misconception that Vietnam has lower wages, so as a result, the products are probably cheaper. But in most times, if you look at some of the other aspects in terms of components which may come from another country, in terms of less productivity, which means it takes a longer time to make a product, and logistics such as lead time, you might actually find that prices are sometimes more expensive in Vietnam than they would have been in China or in Indonesia or India. So it's quite important to benchmark internally, but also with other countries. And obviously look at what you're receiving at the moment compared to what is being proposed. I've seen that people are using Vietnam more as a risk hedge. So to deviate, not having too much production in one area, especially China, and are not looking at so much on price. So these are the things to consider. There are pros and cons to everywhere in Vietnam. There's two big industrial areas, I would say. You've got the northern area and the southern area, and I would say they're more specialized in different sectors. So a bit more heavy industry in the north, and the south can be a bit lighter industry. When you're looking for partners, I mean, R&D capabilities are generally quite weak with local partners, but this is something that they know, and there's always an opportunity there to help people along. But just be aware that if you don't have strong product development or R&D facilities in your home base, be it the UK or elsewhere, bear in mind there is a limited ability to develop products here in Vietnam. So it's really still got very much an assembly culture where you have to provide a lot of the information. But that is changing in some regards slowly, and in other regards it's changing quite fast. Another one, and this is a little bit difficult to assess because there isn't there's not a lot of transparent information out there, but financial strength of your partners is quite important. There will be probably larger deposits when you make orders in Vietnam that you may not be used to in other markets. When something, and it inevitably will go wrong in terms of quality, or maybe instead of sea freight you're having to air freight to make a delivery, all these factors are costly, and you want to ensure that your partner does have the financial strength to cover some of those issues, or at least partly cover some of those issues. So understanding that is quite important. And then another thing, once you've probably selected a partner or partners, is really to look at how you're going to communicate. You may find that that the owner of the local company has limited English, so you might be working through a translator or an account manager, and we've seen time and time again where communication and the chain of command sometimes is a little bit different. So I would stress the importance of having things down on paper and being extremely specific whenever you're handling a new order or developing something. Also, it's good to understand what your partner envisions for themselves. I mean, you have a lot of burgeoning businesses here in Vietnam, so you may find that you've got a very good partner with a factory, but actually he's building condos down the road. So his mind and focus might be elsewhere. So it's really, I think, important to understand what your partner aims to be in 5 or 10 years' time. If you see somebody with good vision, it's good to work alongside them, and they're probably worth sticking around for. And you can hopefully make joint strategies together. The other thing to say is you will inevitably find little issues here and there. I highly recommend making a point of it from day one and working jointly to make those improvements. Generally, Vietnamese suppliers are able to flexibly move and improve. They're not stubborn people in many ways, so they're always happy to move along. One other final factor is if you're doing a lot of, let's say, fast fashion or footwear to some of the blue chip clients in Europe or the US, they will often have their own IT systems. So it's really important that, that you have a way of integrating your IT systems into theirs. More and more we see people not actually handling invoices by email, but actually it's going through a form of basic level artificial intelligence finance packages. So I just think it's important to be ahead when it comes to IT integration. Okay, another little point is about procurement. I think in most markets it's quite simple just to do a purchase order and a purchase invoice, and that should be sufficient for customs. But here in Vietnam, it is quite bureaucratic, and you need to be ready to have contracts that are written in a specific way, and there is often a lot of documentation that goes with it when you're doing a simple transaction. I mean, just link there with banking further down in the slide. But just to make an international payment often requires a thick wad of papers so that people can check and cross-check when US dollars or euros are leaving the country. So just be aware of the time that takes. There's a lot of stamping, a lot of signatures that are needed by the legal representative, and it can be a bit unnerving at first. After a while, you get used to it, but be aware of that. Pricing, obviously, there's many different taxes and prices, and I think Bob will probably have a bit more information on that later on in the presentation. But just be aware that everything has a different HS code. If you look at a pair of shoes like what I manufacture, you will find that depending on the upper material, depending on a sole material, depending on numerous percentages of the components, you will have different tax levels, and they can range anywhere between 2 to 7 or 8%. So that can be quite significant on big volumes. So it's important to understand that and to know what your HS code is. Other than that, just worth looking at freight terms. Obviously, you have the normal FOB and CIFs, but at the moment with the COVID crisis, I can imagine a lot of contracts that were signed on a CIF basis to Europe or the US are coming under pressure due to the high freight rates. So I think it's important to understand where your risk stands and who is responsible for that. Is it the buyer, yourself, or the seller, someone else? So just to make that clear. Finally, COC, Code of Conduct. So factories in Asia have been in the news for quite a while about maybe having substandard labor levels or standards, having children in factories, etc., etc. Vietnam's quite different. People sometimes may not always appreciate just how strong the labor legislation is here. So you tend to find that most companies have a very strong code of conduct because the government cares about these matters. So I would generally say in terms of labor, it's quite good, but you may find areas in smaller factories where there's old facilities and you might have fire hazards, etc. So it's worth doing a proper analysis of any partner you wish to go into business with. Finally, feedback. So please make sure that as soon as you get an order or that you're buying something or you're handling a new supplier, that you give very responsive feedback and keep reviewing your strategy with them, keep negotiating and forecasting. Vietnamese are generally not always looking to swap business very quickly. They are good long-term partners. They will not drop you too quickly just to get a dime elsewhere. So making sure that you're communicating regularly is very important, and that you grow carefully. Do not put all your eggs in one basket too quickly. Make sure you diversify your product across different factories if you need to, but just to make sure that you are well balanced at all times. So those are just some of the thoughts that I feel might be important for somebody coming into the market. I think it's also valid for somebody who's selling products into the market as well. It's not just for sourcing outputs. So UK exports coming in, you would generally look at the same kind of criteria as well. Okay, next slide, please. I think this is the railways in particular, or the proposed railways in the future of Southeast Asia. It will probably take another 10, 15, possibly 20 years to get there, but you can kind of see just how interconnected Southeast Asia will eventually become. And I often like to think it's a bit like the beginnings of a new EU, and who knows, in 20, 30 years time you could have all these highways, and it could be, you know, a 5-hour drive between Ho Chi Minh and Bangkok. So it's quite interesting from a market perspective. 650 million people. I can't remember the exact numbers of GDP growth, but I think pre-COVID, ASEAN as a whole was probably growing between 4 and 5% a year. So quite an exciting market for anybody looking to come in. Okay, next slide, please. Quality is the name of the game, really, if you are supplying to European markets, especially in the UK. And it's often worth having one of these companies help you out. I've written a few there are different ones, but they can often go and do assessments of factories for you. They can then also check an order before it's delivered, just to make sure that everything is in order. You might not have to use them all the time or contract them for a year, but I do highly recommend using some of the great services of these companies here in Vietnam, because they do know what they're doing and they can hold your factory to account. So I hope that's been helpful, Brian, and please don't hesitate to ask any questions.
Thank you, Alex. As always, very, very interesting. As Alex said, if you have any questions, please punch them in the chat down below and we can get to them at the end. Our next speaker today is Mr. Bob Fletcher. Bob is the Director and Leader of Customs and Global Trade as the team in Hanoi, or Ho Chi Minh City here for Deloitte. Prior to joining Deloitte, Bob was the leader of Deloitte's Asia Pacific and Southeast Asia Customs and Global Trade practice. With 35 plus years in customs and global trade consultancy, Bob has assisted many multinational companies across business sectors, structuring their contracts and supply chain arrangements to be customs and duty VAT efficient. Bob is a frequent speaker on various trending customs and trade topics and has provided technical and interpretive guidance to various customs authorities in Southeast Asia and the Asia Pacific region, including Vietnam customs. That was a mouthful. of a bio, Bob, but it's all up to you now.
Okay, Brian, thanks very much, and thanks for the introduction. Next slide. So in the time remaining, I just want to focus this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are, on two issues. And one is the UK Vietnam FTA, which so I give a little bit of detail about that. And then the other one is the cptpp. And again, I'll just give an overview of that FTA arrangement. So next slide. So for those of you that may not be aware, UK and Vietnam signed the UK-Vietnam FTA, and certainly in Vietnam, it was signed on the 29th of December 2020, and has been provisionally applied from the 1st of January 2021. It came into law in Vietnam by a decision which was issued by the Prime Minister on the 31st of December 2020. And it said de facto is being applied, and we're just waiting for some other parts to be resolved before it's sort of all the pieces of the puzzle are all there. In terms of the scope of the FTA, there are sort of four main areas. The one that is most sort of frequently discussed is trading goods, and particularly that is covering the preferential tariffs, the tariff rate quotas, rules of origin, and some of the phytosanitary measures that have been agreed under this FTA. But it also covers trading services. It covers some protections around intellectual property, geographical indications, and also an area on government procurement. For today, I'm just going to focus on the provision of trading goods. And fundamentally, the UK-Vietnam FTA has been adapted from the EVFTA, which, as you know, was sort of concluded last year as well. And basically, I'll say not say it's a full cut and paste, but it's been copied across with some minor modifications to take into account of the differences between the UK and the EU. So next slide. So we just look at some of the key areas. The first one I just want to talk about is tariff quotas, because to advise that there are going to be quotas applied on imports from Vietnam, but mainly these are being applied to agricultural products, and the amount that's been set for the UK is effectively an allocation of what was previously allowed under the EVFTA. Again, not an exact pairing, but very, very similar. So, but again, it's limited, predominantly limited to the agricultural product sector. On the reverse, into Vietnam, Vietnam does have tariff quotas, but they are not impacted by the UK-Vietnam FTA at all. They are more generic quotas, but it's not impacted by this new agreement. The other area I want to just touch on then is the rules of origin. And this is basically what has to be satisfied in order to get the preferential rates of duty, whether you're importing into Vietnam or you're importing into the EU. And we basically have two sort of fundamental tests. The first one, which is often the easier one, is goods which are called wholly obtained. So these are things which are grown in Vietnam or the EU, things are extracted from the soil, live animals and products which are caught by vessels in the sea. So generally speaking, in the agricultural sector, the aquaculture sector, those are pretty easy tests to satisfy. But the other rule that has to be satisfied, which generally applies to manufactured goods, is what is broadly called the not wholly obtained test. And basically, those which are not manufactured 100% from either EU or UK or Vietnam materials, those non-originated materials have to undergo some substantial transformation test. And under the UK FTA, Vietnam FTA, there are basically four tests. The first one is there is a limitation, a value limitation on the quantity of non-originating material that can be used, that remains in the finished product. And non-originating material effectively is neither UK origin or Vietnam origin. So it's another origin of goods, let's say, for example, Chinese origin. So there may be a limitation under the rule as to what percentage there can be, limitation there can be on that content. The other test that could be applied is a change of tariff heading test. So basically, the tariff heading of the finished product must be different to the tariff heading of all the materials, the non-originated materials that we use in the production of that product. Some of the products have to have a specific process. So again, you have to import a material perhaps, and it has to go through certain types of production activity in order to become either UK or Vietnamese origin. And the last variation is the rule could be a combination of the previous three. Not too many of those cases, but potentially that rule does exist. So the rule that will apply will depend upon the HS code of the product that's been exported, either from the UK or from Vietnam. So very important to get the right HS code, because that will determine what the qualifying rule is, and it'll ultimately determine what is the preferential rate that you'll be entitled to obtain in the destination market. Next slide. Okay. I'm going to add just a little bit about accumulation of origin. Again, I'm not to make this sort of too complex or too overly technical. But the accumulation rule, basically, as I said at the beginning, is it allows for UK material and Vietnam material to be treated effectively as one. So an example would be, UK fabric is imported into Vietnam to be used in the manufacture of a Vietnam product, and it will be exported back to the UK. So the content from the UK is added to the content of Vietnam, and that all counts towards the calculation, the determination of the origin rule under the value limitation rule. Now, at the moment, it is restricted, as I said, just to originating material from the UK and originating material from Vietnam. But in 2025, the rule is going to be expanded, and it will actually now allow that EU originating material can also count towards either UK Vietnam origin or Vietnam origin, either way. So it's an expansion, if you like, of the accumulation rule to then bring in the EU. So that will offer a lot more opportunity for products to become qualifying products. So that's a good development and something to look forward to in 2025. The other area then I just want to touch on is proof of origin. So this is what do you need to do in order to get the preferential rates in the country of import. So we actually have slightly different rules, whether you're exporting from the UK to Vietnam or exporting from Vietnam to the UK. If we look at the UK to Vietnam, then basically for consignments where the value does not exceed 6,000 euros, any UK exporter is able to self-certify the origin status of the product on commercial documents. So typically that would be commercial invoice, a packing list, delivery note, etc. So they can self-determine and make a statement of origin on a commercial document. But if the consignment value is more than 6,000 euros, then they will need to obtain a form EUR1 from the certifying authority in the UK. If we switched across to Vietnam to UK, then again for shipments where the consignment does not exceed 6,000 euros, any Vietnam exporter, again, can self-certify the origin status on commercial documents, again, commercial invoices, packing lists, etc. And for consignments exceeding 6,000 euros, again, they have to complete a form EUR1. But I do just want to draw the attention to the fact that the the EUR1 to be used is not the same EUR1 that applies on exports from Vietnam to the EU. There is now an additional EUR series, and for sales to the exports to the UK, it has to be those certificates with the series AA as a prefix. So very important, you make sure if you are completing the EUR1, you use the right set of forms, otherwise you'll be denied the preferential rate on import into the UK. Next slide. Okay. We have some challenges at the moment with regard to claiming a preferential rate on UK originating goods coming into Vietnam. And these fundamentally are linked to the fact that the decree, which is one of the regulations that has to be enacted, the decree which formally announces and publicizes the UK-Vietnam tariff schedule, preferential rates, has not yet been enacted. And the current indication is that it will not be enacted until the end of February 2021. So, although the agreement has gone live and there's the availability of the rates, those rates are not yet in the public domain. So the situation we have is until such time as the decree is actually issued, again, which will then set out clearly what those rates are, importers into Vietnam will need to pay the most favored nation rate, tariff rate, MFN rate. And then once the decree is issued, Vietnam importers can then claim back the overpaid duties with effect from imports that took place on or after 1st of January 2021. So to make sure that Vietnam importers get the benefit, then there's a few things that need to be done. Firstly, you need to get from the UK exporter the proof of origin, so either self-certified commercial document or the EUR1 form. At the time of importation into Vietnam, although the rate is not published, you will have to claim the rate. So there's a text box on the import declaration where you will claim that you want UK-Vietnam FTA preference, but you'll have to pay the MFN rate. And then once the regulation decree is published, then you can go back and put in a refund claim, and you'll get a refund from imports since 1st of January 2021. I do want to emphasize that if you do not, on the import declaration, make the claim for UK-Vietnam FTA treatment, then there is a risk that the refund will be denied. There is a route where you can appeal to the customs headquarters in Hanoi for a decision, but at the moment as it stands, there is guidance recently issued that says if you don't make the claim, then there is a risk that you will be denied the preference. So that's an important point if you're importing into Vietnam. Next slide. Moving on now to cptpp. So again, if you're not aware, part of the UK government's intention to broaden its business and broaden its network of trading partners, the UK on the 1st of February submitted to cptpp group their intention that they would like to join cptpp. In the coming months, we understand that the UK will publish its outline, its scoping analysis, and a response to public consultation. The indication is that could be completed by the end of March or perhaps mid-April. But again, it's an important step for the UK as they broaden its trading partner network. And I think that's going to be one where we'll see some interesting developments in the months ahead. So I just wanted to flag what is the potential benefit of the UK belonging to cptpp. The CPTP group currently, and the last numbers I've got, trading growth was about 111 billion in 2019. And the economy is growing about 8% year on year since 2016. The potential benefits of being a member of this agreement is, again, there is trading goods advantages like an FTA, and there are some simplified and standardized rules of origin and origin procedures, and that's in terms of the process of actually utilizing the FTA. There's commitments there for improvements to customs process and trade facilitation. There's more cooperation and conformity to standards and agreements on government procurement, agreements on trading services, labor mobility, IP protection, and labor and the environment. So it's a very broad agreement. But again, joining the 11 existing members is seen as a big step forward for the UK government, say in growing its trading network. So the left-hand side, I've highlighted who the current members are: Canada, Australia, Brunei, Chile, Japan, Malaysia, Mexico, Vietnam, New Zealand, Peru, and Singapore. So again, there's many of the countries that the UK currently have trading relationships with, but joining CPTPP will enhance those relationships. What are the specific benefits from a trade perspective? The first one is that becoming a member of CPT, it will help to fast track some of the tariff reductions in the destination markets. And I've just shown one or two examples there. Whiskey exports under CPTPP will go down from 165% tariff down to 0% in Malaysia, and cars will reduce to 0% in Canada by 2020, 2 years earlier than currently exists under the UK-Canada trade deal. The rules of origin will allow content from any of these countries to count towards the origin content. So get back to that concept of accumulation, which basically means, as an example here, building a car in the UK could use more Japanese originating parts, such as batteries. They would all count towards effectively UK origin when you're doing the origin determination of the product. So broadly, those are the benefits, and again, I think there's recognise that there are potentially some significant benefits from becoming a member of CPTPP. So we'll have to see how that develops in the months ahead, but I think it's looking quite promising for UK exporters. Next slide. Next slide. So I think I'll hand back to Brian, I think, who will handle the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Always a pleasure to hear you speak. I have to note we did have a third speaker today, but there was a last-minute change. Unfortunately, Mr. Layton could not join us. He was going to talk about logistics. So hopefully we can do a session or episode on the logistics of shipping and things like that at a later date. The first question, let's go ahead and take one from the Q&A during the session. And that is from Terrence Mahoney, with a good question for Alex. And I'll read it here. So it says, what is the productivity of the Vietnamese laborer, and how does it compare to other countries in Asia? Is the workforce capable of reaching tiger status? What is Vietnam's total productivity factor, TPF? Alex?
This is a difficult question because Vietnamese, I would say, are generally very, very productive when they are doing something themselves. And when you have a larger group where you require management skills or strategic decision making or clear communication, unfortunately the productivity does drop. So I think compared to regional countries, you can expect productivity to be about a third of Malaysia's, about a half of Indonesia's and Thailand's. It's about a tenth or even more, about a 15th of Singapore's, and that's if you use GDP numbers. When it comes to your question about tigers, I mean, if you look at Taiwan and Singapore and South Korea, I mean, these old 80s designated tiger countries, they really had a strongman leadership. They had a very strong bureaucracy that went well together, and that really pulled them forwards. I think the Vietnamese leadership is a little bit more consensus seeking, and that means that I don't think Vietnam is a tiger in that sense. They're a bit slow when it comes to doing infrastructure reforms, planning, clear guidance. But it is a tiger in a different way, in the sense that the Vietnamese populace do want to get ahead. They are very keen to learn and improve, and also you're playing regional catch-up. I mean, Vietnam was until recently one of the poorest countries in ASEAN, and is now very much in the middle. So there's a lot of drive, natural drive from the people, but there still requires quite a bit more organization if they want to really become more productive. I hope that helps. Terence, you're also asking for the total productivity factor. I'd have to spend a bit of time calculating that exactly, but I presume there's different ways of calculating it. Thanks.
Thank you for the question, and thank you, Alex. Bob, I have a question for you from earlier before the session started, and it's about customs. What is the customs systems in Vietnam like? Who do I reach out to for support in case of customs issues? This might be an easy question to answer.
Okay, well, let me deal with the easier one first. I mean, Vietnam has a sort of a relatively well advanced customs system. They acquired it from Japan some time ago, and they've done some modifications to that to basically adapt it to Vietnam requirements. So fundamentally, the core of it is quite good. They have moved in the last few years to basically everything now. All customs declarations are done electronically. You know, they've got away with paper declarations, and so now everything is through the system. You know, they are party to single window. You know, they're involved in data transmission between the countries within the member states of ASEAN. So from that perspective, it's quite good. There is another system that sort of sits alongside that, and that is the customs procedure that deals with how they manage compliance. So they have sort of analysis that is ongoing analysis of, you know, importers, types of goods, sourcing of goods, where they are looking to use that data from a risk management perspective in order to determine, you know, whether the goods go like green lane, yellow lane, which means some inspection, and red lane, which means sort of a more detailed examination. So that's a developing system, and from our experience, the two don't necessarily knit together very well. So we have some gaps, which again, you know, we have raised with them, but it's moving in the right direction. I think Vietnam recognizes that, you know, it has to improve the throughput through the port. They have historically been lots of snags in the supply chain because goods have been stuck at the port, and that has led to a lot of complaint against customs. And the government, you know, are keen to make sure that, you know, the borders, the trade through the borders is not restricted. So it is moving in the right direction, but it still has a little bit of a way to go. But again, I think we're seeing positive steps on that. And certainly, you know, Deloitte are pushing them to make further improvement on that. On the second part, who to go to? Well, obviously, you know, I'll say, you know, Deloitte will be pleased to help. I think that there's a couple of issues. One is, I think, to understand that there often a bit of a gap between the concept and the policy, which is set at headquarter level of customs, and the actual practical application of that at regional or local level. And often, when there are issues and there are challenges and difficulties at the border points, it's often because the border customs are not clear on what their responsibility is, or they're not clear on how to interpret regulation. So certainly we spend a lot of time with customs at the borders, helping to sort of, shall we say, educate them on how the regulations should be applied. Because they are very sort of black and white. So, if it's clearly specified in a regulation or a guidance that's issued, they will follow that. If it's not specifically covered, then they will err on the side of caution, and they will protect the tax. They will protect the revenue by saying, it doesn't say you can do something, therefore, effectively, you cannot do that. So, you do require, on some cases, to effectively lobby, to make representation to actually get them to come round to what you want to achieve. But it can be done. We do that on a daily basis in discussion with customs. So they are amenable. You can make representation to them, and they will listen. So that will be my comment.
Thank you, Bob. There's one more question through the Q&A here that just came in for Alex, I believe. That would be, when talking about supply chain, what do the speakers think about the role of transportation and Vietnam's transport performance, infrastructure and service?
Well, I think it's a very good question. It's a very poignant question, because Vietnam's economy is growing very fast, and its infrastructure is not really keeping up. I think it's very positive to see the developments of the deep sea ports in the south of Vietnam, at Cai Mep, and also in the north of Vietnam in Hai Phong. It's very positive to see that the works on the new airport in Ho Chi Minh is happening, and the north-south highway. But if I were to be a bit critical, all this should have been done about 10 or 15 years ago, to be quite frank. The issue I foresee, or that we are living with in the moment, is actually the roadways, and the roadways between industrial zones and ports. And this is really taking a lot of time. You're losing a lot of money with trucks standing still. I think Vietnam in the region has probably one of the highest logistic costs of all the countries in ASEAN, bar Myanmar, I think. So there's certainly a lot to do and a lot to improve. And I think one of the other aspects that we need to take into account is safety as well. There are an incredible number of young and people going to school every day, and quite frankly, the way that the container trucks are going around the city is not really acceptable for an economy that wants to promote itself as modern and competitive. So those are my thoughts. They're they're quite opinionated, because after 13 years of living in the country, I have not seen Vietnam do enough. The north of Vietnam, I think, is a lot better. There's been a lot more investment. There's 700 kilometers of highways, but in the south of Vietnam, there's only 100 kilometers of highways. So we need it down here. Service-wise, I think the service from most forwarders and transport companies is what you can expect. And I would say that they're professional and as efficient as they can be with the limitations of the infrastructure around them. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. Brian,
thanks, Alex. I got one more. Sorry, go ahead.
No, but just to add to, I mean, everything, totally agree with everything that Alex has said. I think I will just make the observation. I think the government knows it needs to do more on the infrastructure, and I think they have a plan. They've announced a national plan of objectives they want to achieve. I think the issue they have is the funding, and they have been looking at public-private partnership to sort of try and develop some of the motorway systems, the expressway systems. So I think they recognise they have to do more. We're seeing that they're putting a lot of emphasis in the moment to increasing like the distribution hubs, structure of distribution hubs, warehousing facilities, because they recognize that they have got to improve getting goods cleared through the borders. So there's a lot of effort going on in building these new distribution hubs, and many of the sort of the big, shall we say, foreign trade companies and logistics companies are investing here quite heavily to sort of build up that structure. But I agree with Alex. They know what they got to do, and they know they have to do it quickly. But I think they are struggling somewhat in terms of having the resources to actually pay for that. But again, it's going in the right direction, and if they want to be where they want to be, which is to be a hub for ASEAN, then they know they have got to improve, and they have to improve quite quickly. So, but I think again, year on year, I think we see positive improvement.
Maybe just also to that comment, I mean, Vietnam is in many ways in quite a good financial way. They have not actually indebted themselves as a government. They're below the 65% threshold. They could actually borrow more and speed up some of the infrastructure decisions. They could make the PPP more attractive to foreign investors. So they do have levers that they can use if they want to boost us. And I sincerely hope they push hard and start to do so.
Thank you. I have just another question, and I think we'll make this our last one, from an anonymous attendee. So they say the shipping lines have taken advantage of the pandemic and increased freight lines or freight rates, which is making it unviable to ship products out of Vietnam at the moment. What is the government doing to put pressure on the shipping lines to get the rates back to normal? Is there truth to that from your perspective, Alex? And is there anything the government's doing?
Well, I'd probably say that most freight companies are private companies, so they can charge what they want, really. They provide a service. The last time that Vietnam had its own container manufacturing, about 10 years ago, unfortunately, the company went bust, which is a shame because they could do with that now. There's nothing a government can do. It's the market that will dictate how quickly the containers come back from Europe. When the prices are high enough, you will see ships full of empty containers all coming back to Asia. Just on a wider scale, I mean, one has to remember what happened in 2008 financial crisis. A lot of the shipping companies were very badly burnt. There was a lot of consolidation in the market. So you probably have 4 or 5 players now controlling 80% of the market. And yeah, they are in no rush to change the situation. So there's not much the government can do. I don't know, Bob, if you have anything additional to add there.
No, I agree. And again, we're seeing through some of the representations that have been made to the government, through Vietnam Business Forum, etc. Many companies are expressing concern about some of the rates that have been charged. But as you said, these are controlled by private industry, and say that somebody said the other day, we would like to get access to the containers. They are in the wrong places, and if we could get hold of them, then maybe there's some scope to come down on the rates. But at the moment, I think generally people are saying it is what it is. But I mean, the government recognises that there's probably not a lot they can actually do. Can't force private businesses to move empty boxes around the world. So I think we just got to hope that the pandemic comes to a manageable level soon, and trade gets back to where it was. So that would be my only other observation.
Yeah, maybe just one more comment there. We've been exploring a little bit the chances of using the train from China to Germany. I don't think we've done a trial yet, but this is an opportunity that's happening. And also potentially trucking to larger ports, so Bangkok, or trucking up into China, where you might have more regular direct sailings to Europe. So these are maybe short-term stopgap measures you can use. I'm not sure if that's helpful.
Thank you. I just got a comment that says, much of the freight price increase is due to container shortages.
Yes.
Yeah, so that would definitely impact the cost. There's just not enough of the containers.
Well, there are enough containers, but they're in the wrong places.
Right, not enough in not enough in Vietnam.
Not enough in Asia.
Yeah. Okay. I'd like to take a moment to say thank you to Mr. Bob Fletcher and Mr. Alex Falter, our panelists today, and their thoughtful presentations on customs and supply chain. For the audience out there, please note that the Lunar New Year holiday starts next week. So we're going to take a little bit of a break from our episodes, and we'll pick up with episode 5 in early March, which is about setting up and finding your business location. And we'll give you some guidelines in that area. In the meantime, make sure you follow us on the social media channels, which are listed there on the slide. And don't hesitate to get in touch with BritCham if you have any questions about this topic or any other of our previous topics as well. We can share this presentation with you if you request, so please don't hesitate to do that. In the meantime, we hope you have a wonderful day wherever you're sitting today, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you, and we'll see you after the lunar holiday.
Thank you.